You for being here, everyone. Welcome. It's the first Friday of the month. So you know what that means? It's time for Ask the Dietitian. That's me. It's what we do once a month. We pick a topic, and then our participants get to ask me questions related to the topic. And then I put together a PowerPoint, which I'm about to share with you to answer each of those questions. As per usual, our participants did not disappoint, and they asked me a lot of really great questions. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm hopeful to really get through this uh, 45 minutes rather quickly because there were a lot of questions for me to answer, and I love doing it. So, thanks for being here. If you're watching on Facebook Live, I hope you get to enjoy a little taste of Ask the Dietitian for your Friday afternoon. And if you're like joining late or you have to leave early, remember we're on YouTube as well. So you can subscribe to the Cancer Wellness Center channel on YouTube, and all of this stuff gets recorded. So you get to view this at your own leisure, which is really nice too. So this month's topic is plant proteins, a very popular one. And they're on your slide, you see an image of a lot of great choices. I'm going to dive deeper into discussing a little bit more about them and finding ways to invite them to your plate so that you have really enhance your cancer protective diet. So I'm going to go through each of those questions, give you my answers, and share some resources along the way so that you can sort of extend um, upon the information that you learned today and build your knowledge. If you so desire, you also could work with me one-on-one at Cancer Wellness Center. So if you haven't explored that yet and you're curious to learn more about that, just reach out to the center or stay on or drop a comment in the chat on Facebook. I'm happy to reach out. Okay, so let's get to those questions. I'm interested in learning about a variety of plant proteins. You've come to the right place. Which ones are best? Really great questions. So first, let's take a step back though. What is protein, and why is it so? Why is it all the rage right now? Why is it so important for our health? It is an essential component of a healthy diet because we need to eat it regularly. So we need protein to basically make and repair all of our cells. So in addition to muscles, which that's sort of the most obvious reason why we kind of what we relate protein in our diet to our body and body's function is muscle. It also protein also makes up organs, our hair, our nails. And it's very important for a lot of different functions in the body. Protein helps us fight infections, really important this time of year. It helps to transport fat, minerals, vitamins, as well as oxygen. It helps us to build and contract muscles. It keeps our body fluids in balance. It also clots our blood. So, super vital functions for protein and why we need to eat more of it. Now, you might be wondering, what are plant foods that are high in protein? So, there's three kind of categories that I like to include to kind of explain a lot of different points about plant proteins that you're going to learn about from me today. So there's three. The first is beans and lentils. The second are whole and intact whole grains like quinoa, oats, farro. I'm going to dive deeper into that as well. And then nuts and seeds. So pepitas, peanuts, sunflower, hemp seeds, just some examples of good sources of protein. But really, the whole family within each of these three categories, they're great. And I'm going to give you, again, more specific examples as we go through. Whole soy food kind of stands out in and of itself. And I'm going to answer a question about soy food in today's episode. But tofu, tempeh, and edamame, they're kind of, even though they are beans, they're exceptional. And they really are an important component to a cancer protective diet as well. So we're going to talk about that. Plant foods have varying amounts and types of amino acids. So, this is when you might have heard about complementary proteins in the diet, like eating beans and rice together. That really has to do with the amino acids that they contain. So, they kind of complement one another because our beans have certain amino acids, while our rice and other grains have a different profile of amino acids. So, whole grains tend to be low in lysine, which is an amino acid. Legumes, so our beans and, and lentils, they're low in methionine, which is another type of amino acid. Nuts and seeds are low in lysine, methionine, and cysteine. So, really, the bottom line and the moral of the story here is that we need to try to think variety especially if we're only eating plant foods for protein, because we want to get these different types of amino acids into our bodies every day if we can. So, eating a variety is most important if you are following a vegan or really mostly plant based diet. Okay. If you're not and you're eating some animal foods, even if it's just a couple times a week, you probably have less to worry about this. Now, again, if you have some questions, I'm here to consult with to give you more confidence and more specific suggestions for you. So, which ones are best? So, I'm going to talk mostly about my two favorites, which are beans and lentils, and then whole grains next. So, beans and lentils are really rock stars because, well, most Americans don't eat them, but they're very high in protein and they're also high in a lot of other great nutrients. And I'm going to talk about that. So, don't forget to visit the frozen section or the freezer section of the grocery store and stock your freezer because there are some really great options that provide us with nutrition but also convenience at the same time. So, for example, black eyed peas. These are in our frozen section at the grocery store. You literally have to just thaw them out. Because they're already cooked, or you can just reheat them. It does not get any easier, especially because the only thing that's in this frozen bag of black eyed peas is one ingredient, and you guessed it, it's black eyed peas. So it's really great. Canned options are all, of course, they're okay, and I almost always recommend that individuals have them in their pantry as well. They're super, super convenient. And when we rinse them, we rinse away the salt and the sodium that's packed inside that can. So up to 40% is removed when we rinse them. So it's a really great option as well. Whole soy foods in the beans category, beans and lentils. So that edamame, the tempeh, tofu, and texturized vegetable protein. You're probably wondering what's texturized vegetable protein or TVP. It's just basically they take the fat out of soy and then they dry it and they turn it into a flour. But we'll find it available. And some of you who might be savvy about this, it may have already experimented with this in your own kitchen at home. But we can find TVP in granules and different like chunks, and then as even as strips, like long thin strips. But a lot of food companies will also use TVP in some plant-based protein products. TVP itself is like porous and chewy, so it sort of is a great mimic for ground beef. And that's where some people I've worked with, I haven't personally dabbled with TVP, but some people I've worked with use it in place of ground beef in their recipes. So, really great option here if you're kind of already eating a plant based diet and looking to expand on your repertoire. Now, someone wondered about and asked this question about soy, and is soy something to avoid? And we're going to sort of set the record straight about the myths and misconceptions about soy. I'm not going to sort of set the record straight. I am going to set the record straight. So it is safe to include soy food as part of a healthy diet, even after a breast cancer diagnosis, because you may have heard that um, there are phytoestrogens in soy, and that if you have an estrogen receptor positive breast cancer, that you wouldn't want to feed that breast cancer with phytoestrogens that are very high in soy. You may have heard that. And at one point in time, we did believe that. However, we've come a long way, and it's been decades since we thought that. So early fears about soy foods causing breast cancer have been debunked by a large body of research. We have ultimate confidence that this is okay. And it's beneficial to eat these whole soy foods like tofu and edamame. We recommend them for our breast cancer survivors. You may also be wondering about soy protein powders because they exist as well. And a lot of our, processed foods that are high in protein, they sometimes add soy as a way to add more protein to the product. And you might be scrutinizing the ingredients on a label. What we're finding is that these soy protein additives and the powders, they're also safe to eat. However, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that they are nutritionally inferior to whole soy foods because they just lack nutrients and those beneficial plant compounds for someone who's been diagnosed with a cancer. So if you want to learn more about that when you get these slides, especially if you submitted questions today, you will get the slides. You can literally click on this link and it'll bring you up to some really high quality, trustworthy information about soy and the misconceptions related to cancer. Okay, so more about plant proteins, whole and intact grains. So intact grains are the most unprocessed of the family of grains, and they retain the entire unbroken kernel. So really good examples of that are quinoa, steel cut oats, buckwheat groats, millet, farro, teff. And if you've ever had teff or millet or even quinoa, I mean, they're like teeny tiny. They're pseudo cereals actually, so they're technically like a seed in the botanical sense. Um, and they're so small they like can't be broken apart. So imagine in the spectrum of processing how great that is for us. It's going to really be what it was as it existed in nature. Whole grains are also a fantastic choice and absolutely on the list for cancer fighting foods. They're processed just slightly, just in order to make them more digestible for us. So, some good examples of that are whole wheat pasta and then products that are made from whole wheat and brown rice and oats, such as old fashioned oats or even instant oats. Those are examples of whole grains. The list goes on and on. I could spend all day talking about whole grains. Now, there's a lot of convenient options here as well, just like our beans and our lentils. So, did you know in the freezer section of the grocery store, we find whole grains that are already cooked? And again, all we have to do is thaw them out. We can enjoy them cold if we want, or just quickly reheat them. Typically, when I have products that are in bags, I recommend not to reheat them in the bag in the microwave, but just take them out of the bag. And it's just a little creativity. So just put them in a microwave safe bowl, add maybe a little bit of water or broth, and then just reheat them at a little lower power for a little bit longer until it's desirable. Another great choice, this isn't in the frozen section, but this could be in your pantry. And this is a great product line, Seeds of Change. And this particular product has 7 whole grains. And the whole grains that are in here are not typically things that you might eat, but it's bundled up into this package, low in sodium, high in fiber. There are some proteins in there. So it's a really great option, super convenient. And especially if you're short on time, you're struggling with fatigue, or you're just not that confident in the kitchen with what to do with some of these intact and whole grains. So some of these products really have help us fill the gap so that we can invite more nutrition in a convenient way. So, a couple people asked questions about like eating a variety, and that certainly was the question that I'm trying to still answer. How to eat more of a variety of whole grains. And so, I just want to go through a couple options for you to see. So, for breakfast, this might be like a day's worth. So, breakfast could be scrambled tofu, a lentil curry soup, a bean and quinoa burger, you can have oats with some hemp seeds on top for breakfast, a hummus wrap with maybe some leftover roasted vegetables, some tempeh tacos over brown rice or with brown rice, a chia seed pudding for breakfast, a glory bowl, which that's an image you see on the slide there. These are one of my favorite, like no recipe meals because you just take what you have. Maybe it's some leftovers. It's sort of like a clean out the fridge. What do I have available? You mix a yummy sauce or dressing and you pour it over top, and boom, you've got this really yummy template to follow. But I mean, just look at that image alone. You know that that's nutritious. I think it looks pretty tasty too, or like a lentil bolognese for dinner. So the list goes on and on here. And these just give you some examples. This is a day's worth of vegan eating. So I didn't even introduce things like some dairy or eggs or a little bit of fish, because that certainly would be healthy. But if we're looking to go strictly vegan, what I did here is I gave you variety. And hopefully you saw that. So things like tofu, our soy, right? Our lentils, our quinoa, our whole wheat, so whole grains. So I'm giving you each from those categories, right? So we're thinking whole grains, we're thinking beans, and we're thinking nuts and seeds. And if we can just kind of tap into each of those choices throughout the day, we're doing a great job, okay, in terms of variety. All right, next questions. Really important one to ask. What is the daily requirement for plant proteins and how are they processed in comparison to meat? So we need to eat protein, right? We really have a need for amino acids, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. Don't necessarily assume that the more protein we eat, the better. And I'm going to talk about this in a moment. Like we seem to have an obsession here with protein in this country. We just need to eat enough. Now, sometimes we may require a little bit more than normal, or we might temporarily might need more than normal under certain circumstances. And a really good example of that is cancer treatment, especially chemotherapy. And I would also say most often surgery. That that's going to require us to rebuild our body after the treatments. And so the building blocks for that, again, are amino acids found in protein. So not only does the amount matter, but the quality does as well, as especially as it relates to plant proteins. So proteins are made of these building blocks called amino acids. I've been explaining that. There are 9 essential ones that we absolutely need to eat. There's 11 other ones that are called non-essential because we don't have to eat them. Our body can actually make them from the essential amino acids. Isn't that cool? So compared with animal proteins, plant proteins have lower essential amino acid density, but they have a ton of other benefits. So I don't want to dismiss that. So they just tend to have a lower range of these amino acids, as I explained in the last answer, but they also have smaller quantities. So it doesn't make them necessarily inferior, but if we're going to really compare animal to plant proteins, certainly the animal proteins have a higher amino acid density or a higher amino acid profile. So this may become relevant. And again, working with a dietitian is going to help you ultimately understand that. I'm going to explain this in another question. So I'm not going to dive too deep into that one. But when we eat plant proteins, we certainly can, especially when we're knowledgeable and savvy about how to use a variety of them, we certainly can meet our protein goals. But the benefit of adding plant proteins are that we get more than just protein. We get magnesium specifically, that's what the research has shown. And we certainly get more fiber because animal foods don't have really any fiber. And so this is a great way to enhance your overall diet while satisfying your requirements for basic nutrition. So historically, nutrition experts have recommended what is called the RDA, or the recommended dietary allowance, and it was set at zero point 0.8 grams per kilo of your body weight per day. So you can do that math for yourself if you'd like. And that amount was established a while ago, like again, decades ago. And this was to prevent a deficiency. And it represents the lowest intake that maintains equilibrium for our body. So that's the minimum. We don't want to go any lower than that number. Now, that amount did not reflect the intake required to maintain optimal muscle in healthy adults or metabolic function. And so, this is why our new dietary guidelines, which I'm going to explain in a moment, has increased this number in terms of the amount recommended because enough science, enough evidence has come forward to suggest that we can eat higher amounts than this zero point 0.8 grams. The AMDR, that stands for the acceptable macronutrient distribution range. That defines the proportion of the total energy that can be derived from protein while supporting nutrient adequacy and reducing chronic disease risk. So for protein, we have 3 macronutrients: protein, carbs, and fat. Protein can represent anywhere from 10% up to 35% of the calories that we eat. This is where a dietitian comes in handy. So knowing one is really helpful. And in practice, I very often like to use the AMDR in terms of recommending protein amounts, because then we're really looking at the big picture. So for the remaining percentage of calories, what are we taking from carbohydrate and what are we taking from protein and how, or fat? And then how are we balancing all of that out with how much protein we might be eating? Okay. And you could see there's a nice big range here from 10 to 35%. So there's a lot to play with. And what that flexibility gives me as a practitioner is the opportunity to really fine tune what it is that the person that I'm working with needs and could benefit from in terms of grams of protein per day. Now, in practice, the ADMR and the RDA complement one another. So practitioners, dietitians will often use kind of both of them or one of them and kind of go from there. So as I shared, our most recent dietary guidelines for Americans, this was increased. So from 0.8, now they're jumping up to 1.2 to 1.6 grams of protein per kilo body weight. Now, just want to let you know that the average American eats a gram per kilo per day, just about. I think that's an underestimate. I have a feeling we eat more than that because we're terrible at estimating how much we eat. We tend to like underreport like a third of what we're eating. So we might want to multiply this by a third. And then translating that to that AMDR, the accessible macronutrient distribution range, we're getting about 16% of our calories from protein. So I have a good feeling that we're probably eating enough, right? Now, two-thirds of the protein, and this is based on surveys again of the kind of the average American, two-thirds of the protein we tend to eat come from animal sources. So we're getting that high quality amino acid nutrient profile, right? Because we're eating mostly animal proteins. Protein deficiencies are extremely rare. If you are critically ill, that might be a different story. But if you're walking around functioning, maybe getting treatment, coming, done with treatment, wherever you might be on the spectrum, chances are you're not deficient in protein. You might be under consuming it. And if you're concerned about that, I want you to talk to your healthcare provider, talk to your oncologist, get a referral to a dietitian because we can be very helpful. Now, this is separate than protein. We do see that nutrient gaps can occur if you're eating a vegan diet. So if you're vegan, sometimes what I will explore in practice is making sure someone's eating enough of their vitamins and minerals. So specifically B12, iron, zinc, iodine, and calcium. But otherwise, we also see from the research that eating a vegan diet can easily meet someone's protein requirements. Okay, so we don't really have to worry here about eating enough protein or amino acids. Now, there seems to be a little obsession with protein, right? So the new dietary guidelines that were just released recommended almost double the amount than we have ever seen before. So there was a little backlash about that, among many other things. But a lot of practitioners were just kind of questioning if that needed to be the accurate number because most of us, again, are eating probably that amount easily. So really bottom line, how much protein you need is best determined by a registered dietitian, as you don't want to consume more than you need, right? And I started to answer this question with that statement. Don't assume the more the better. If you're eating too much, if you're trying to manage your weight, that's only going to lead to excess weight. So we just want to know that we're eating enough. Again, if you want confidence, work with a dietitian. What's missing from our guidelines, and this is why there was a little kind of public professional opinion about this, that the guidelines, we would have appreciated a little clarity about the quality of the different types of protein that we could eat in food, right? So if we're going to recommend this high amount, double the amount of protein than has been previously recommended, it would have been nice to emphasize the high quality proteins, and that's our plant-based ones, and as well as fish, by the way. So evidence has continued to suggest, as it has before, that plant-based proteins and fish are associated with more favorable health outcomes when we compare them to diets that are high in red meat. So just a little opportunity for the dietitian to get on our soapbox about the dietary guidelines. They seem to be very meat, red meat especially, focused, when that may not necessarily be what was accurately found in the scientific report for this new release of the dietary guidelines. So here are some lists. So now you have sort of some numbers to work with, especially if you've done the math for yourself. If you're confused about math, I can help with that. That's what I do. But here's a list of where we find protein in some of our plant food choices. So you see some of them are pretty impressive, like tempeh. And tofu is not far behind, especially the high protein tofu, where they squeeze out all the extra liquid. And so it sort of concentrates everything else that's in it, including protein. But our beans can get us there. There are some great pasta alternatives like lentil or chickpea, and that's 2 ounces cooked. Quinoa is a half a cup cooked, which most of us are probably eating more than this, right? So you can do the numbers here with this, but I just put down some sensible portions and how much protein you can see we're getting from it. Now, what about processing our plant proteins and processing meat? I'm hopeful that I'm answering this question in the way that the question asker was intending me to answer it. We don't really have a formal agreed upon definition for processed food. In fact, in our dietary guidelines, they just use the terminology highly processed, but you may have heard around like the word ultra processed being tossed out there. We really don't have agreed upon consensus for the way to define processed food. So it's a work in progress right now. So stay tuned. We'll be able to report back about that hopefully soon. So it's not as easy to answer this question in the way that I'm thinking the person that asked it wants me to. But plant proteins, we know we have some that are very minimally processed, right? They might just pluck them off the plant and put them in a bag, and then we just have to cook it and eat it. And that's a great way of having minimally processed plant proteins. But there are some, because plant-based diets have been increasingly popular, and there are a lot of other products that are processed that are on the market that are really sort of meant to mock meat and be meat substitutes or even chicken substitutes. Here's how they're made. What they do is they extract protein from plants, and they do this in one or more than one way. They apply extremes, right? Extreme moisture, extreme heat, or even just extreme pressure to get that protein out of the plant. I can't even imagine what that's like. And then they add stuff to it because, these plant proteins aren't really that palatable if you take them out that way. So they got to add some things. They add fats, and they tend to add coconut oil, especially if it's a plant-based meat alternative. So coconut oil being pretty high in saturated fat and not something that we necessarily want to overconsume. We want to put limits on that. But they'll add binders, they'll add colors, they add these savory flavors in order to mimic the flavor and the texture of meat. So that's where we might want to give some pause, right? Because depending on our own health goals with our food choices, we want to kind of see what else we're getting because the plant protein itself, it might be great for us, but what else are we getting in this package, right? So that's where we just want to give some pause and be critical about what else is added in that product. A lot of sodium sometimes too. So and then once they do that, they shape it and they form it, and that's how we get burgers and nuggets and sausages that are made from plants. Yum. And certainly there are some choices that I think are worthy, and I think we make trade-offs. So sometimes if we're having a plant-based meat alternative, it might be really high in salt, but if we're controlling our salt intake for the rest of the day, it might fit into an overall healthy diet. Now, as it relates to meat, how do we process meat, right? So we're making a comparison here. So like this goes without saying, animal foods are raised and processed on farms, factories, and lots. Sometimes they're raised and slaughtered right there, or sometimes they're raised and shipped off, and that's where they get slaughtered and processed. Fish and shellfish doesn't sound very appetizing right now, right? Fish and shellfish can be caught in the wild or farmed in ocean, rivers, or even in tanks. Processed meat is technically defined as curing or smoking or salting or fermenting or even just adding preservatives such as nitrites to extend the shelf life and enhance the flavor of the meat. So very common examples are a hot dog or bacon or deli meat. Now, deli meat itself, speaking of, is often an amalgamation of several different parts of the animal. That definitely doesn't sound appetizing. And my audience, I'm going to assume, probably knows most of that. So it's hard to really say exactly what's happening with deli meat or even like a hot dog unless we approach the manufacturer and ask how they're processing that meat. Just FYI, cancer experts recommend that we limit processed meat. So really trying to avoid it as much as possible. And then also limit red meat. So red meat has nutrition, right? It's a little bit processed, but not ultra processed like the processed meat is. So red meat, they just want to put a cap on because we have data and evidence that suggests that eating that amount, it doesn't harm us. It's not detrimental. So eating less than 12 to 18 ounces of cooked red meat per week is completely okay in a cancer protective diet. So some of my friends who are interested in still having some red meat, it's a little reassuring to know that that's kind of the limit, which is quite a bit, if you ask me, to have in a week and still have a healthy cancer protective type of lifestyle. Okay, next question. So many great questions. Which is better, food or supplements? You gotta ask the dietitian that. What is the dietitian gonna say? So whenever we eat food, we're receiving the nutrients in a way that our bodies are designed to receive it, of course. And dietitians always emphasize a food first philosophy. So what that means is that food is really meant to be our primary choice in terms of nutrition. It's because when we eat food, especially food that it has protein, it contains more than just the protein, right? There's other nutrients, there's other things happening in that package, good and bad, right? But hopefully, if we're choosing the best plant protein choices, we're getting a package of other really great healthy things alongside it. So, beans and lentils, for example, besides the plant protein, we're getting fiber, we're getting some vitamins and minerals, we're also getting cancer fighting phytochemicals. So, all good stuff. Now, the supplement industry, in terms of protein supplements, I think I went into the wrong field. $13.5 billion industry. That's insane, right? So a lot of people are using them, and there's some good choices to be made. So I have some to share. But I can imagine it's overwhelming and daunting because what do you choose? How do you decide? There's so many to choose from. Common types of plant protein supplements are sourced from pea, soy, brown rice, hemp, a lot of our seeds like pumpkin, sunflower, sacha inchi, chia. But most commonly, the supplements I pick up and I look at are a blend of them. So it might not just be a pea protein, it might be a pea plus a sacha inchi, which, by the way, that image on the slide, those are sacha inchi seeds. They're seeds. So they look like a little star in the pod. And they are delicious roasted. If you haven't had a chance to try them, they are, I find them to be delicious and really yummy. Okay. So how do you decide if you should take a protein supplement, especially a plant protein one? So first consider how much protein you even need, and then how much you are eating or not eating, right? And think too, if you need to have it because of circumstances. Are you going for surgery? Are you on active chemotherapy? So that might help kind of guide you in making the decision whether or not you would benefit from one. If you decide that would be beneficial, and of course you consult with a dietitian to help, I want you to go through this checklist. So I want you to first look at the primary ingredients, and I would prefer that you, if you're going to go plant based with your protein, to look for a blend because that's going to guarantee that there's more of that amino acid profile and that density that you're looking for, right? So a pea protein plus, for example. Look at other ingredients, right? And this is where supplements can potentially lead us down the wrong path. Uh, they may have sweeteners, they may have flavors or additives or other things that you may not necessarily want or need or desire. So we can really scrutinize labels for that as well. And then I would encourage, just like any other supplement, protein supplements are really loosely regulated. So we want some reassurance that what is in the package is what should be in the package and hopefully free of contaminants. So there's two companies that independently test products and give us a little bit of that reassurance. So NSF and the USP. So look for those seals on a label, and that's going to give you a little bit more of that guarantee. Okay. So here's my top 3 choices. If you're gonna go plant protein supplements, I really like this Ritual Essential Protein. It's a pea protein. It's grown here in the US, and they complement it with L-methionine because if you remember, peas, like other beans and legumes, are low in methionine. So what do you think they do? They add more to complement the other amino acids that are in the pea protein. I am a big fan of Drink Wholesome. They have a dietitian on the staff here, and it's really made for sensitive stomachs, which I'm going to get into in the next couple questions. So if you're looking for options there, there's a lot of different yummy varieties. They even have an unflavored one, especially vegan, and they usually use almonds as their protein source, and they're really kind of just straightforward and sort of like a clean label with not many ingredients. And then the Thorn Vegan Pro Complex. So they are NSF certified. And in Australia, there's like a regulatory agency that has very strict regulations, and they've approved this supplement as well. So they use their own proprietary blend. That means they don't tell us what it is, but it's made from fermented pea and rice proteins plus a chia seed. So those are just some options if you're curious to try. Okay, I'm going to keep going. What would you have to eat in a day to obtain your protein quota solely from plants? I love this question. So I just kind of assumed the average typical person might want to eat 1,600 calories. And then I took 20% of those calories from protein, because remember, I'm allowed to use that range of 10 to 35. So I sort of split the difference there. And this is what I got, 80 grams of protein. So how do we eat 80 grams of protein on a vegan diet? Not that hard. You're going to be surprised. So a little tofu scramble, and still keep the calories low, right? And then a yummy whole grain or a sourdough toast, a little bit of olive oil on top. That's a nice way to kind of complement health there with that meal. For lunch, a lentil bowl. So some lentils, some quinoa, some roasted veggies. And we don't even portion out the veggies because you can eat as much as you want, basically. And then a little drizzle of tahini. I'm hungry. All right, dinner chickpea stir fry. So specifically 3/4 cup of cooked chickpeas. Again, the veggies we don't really count. Just add as much as you want. It's a nice way to satisfy hunger. A little bit of sesame oil and tamari. I love that combination, especially over a stir fry. Put this over some zucchini noodles or cauliflower rice. And then even snacks, right? Because probably this isn't it doesn't look like a lot to eat to me. So I would want a snack. So making sure those snacks come from plant proteins as well. So I love the idea of a smoothie with unsweetened soy milk or a pea protein milk, cup of berries, a little bit of peanut butter, and then a cup of edamame in the pods. Really yummy snacks. That would fit the bill for getting 80 grams of protein on a 1600 calorie diet. If you want more, this is exactly what dietitians can help you do. Okay, we can help you design that for yourself. Okay. Now, I promised I would come back to this. So, gut friendly plant protein choices and the easy to digest ones, and what are the best choices for chemo? So, I'm going to start with chemo first. That's what I do as a dietitian. I talk about the clinical application of all this information. So, for someone who's on chemo, I tend to recommend ones that are easier to tolerate. So, that's why I lumped all of these in together because chances are, if you have any gut sensitivity, these are going to be the best ones for you to choose. So tofu, as versatile as it is, you can go savory to sweet with tofu. You can put it in smoothies. I mean, it's a really wonderful option. So economical, but very well tolerated for most people that I work with. Soy milk and pea protein milk blends, smooth or creamy nut butters rather than the chunky ones, or seed butters like tahini, hemp seeds, oats and quinoa that are obviously cooked. And then plant-based protein powder, if you're on chemo, may help to fill a gap there. Now I'm including an image, and then I also want to expand on this in the next slide. This is from a great review article from just a few years ago, where they're just sort of putting head to head animal proteins and plant proteins, and what is the difference between them in terms of the nutrition that they have to offer. So as it relates to someone who's been diagnosed with a cancer and as someone on active treatment, I tend to recommend some sources of animal proteins because they have a greater density of the amino acids that we need to eat, right? They have a greater amount of leucine, which is important for muscle protein synthesis because muscle tends to go down during after treatment for many oncology patients. It has more calories. For many people I work with, they're having a trouble eating enough, and everyone's different. But for chemo, sometimes people have trouble eating enough. So we might want to maximize what someone's eating in terms of all the nutrition that's in it. And this is why animal foods sometimes fit that bill. There's a little bit more iron, there's more vitamin B12. How we digest the amino acids is a little bit better in animal proteins compared to plant proteins. And there's a greater anabolic potential. What that means is muscle protein synthesis. So it helps us build muscle, which can be really compromised during chemo. This is from that same article, and it's kind of the same idea, is that after a diagnosis, if you're on your curative treatment or even palliative treatment, I would recommend that you're getting about 1.2 to 1.5 grams per kilo of weight a day in protein, and that 65% or more of that comes from animal sources. So that's where we start to look towards dairy and fish and eggs and poultry and so on and so forth. If someone is exclusively vegan on treatment, or especially chemotherapy, or going for surgery, I work closely with that person just to make sure that they're eating enough of the micronutrients, eating enough of those essential amino acids. Now, once you're done with treatment and you're post treatment, guess what? We don't have to worry so much. We don't have to kind of get obsessive about where the protein's coming from. And we can really focus instead on those plant proteins. Okay. And that's actually what is recommended for a cancer protective diet. Okay. You could see how circumstances matter for somebody. And it's just sort of a snapshot in time that should be reassessed and can change. So a little bit more of those gut-friendly choices. For some people, I work with tempeh because it's fermented. They tend to do pretty well with. I love recommending red lentils. If you've ever cooked like a red lentil, I make a red lentil like curry and it's delicious, but the red lentils just kind of melt away. So they're really a lot different than something like, like kidney beans or pinto beans. So a nice choice in the bean family, being the lentil family. Tofu, hemp seeds, quinoa, edamame. Drain and rinse your canned beans. Enjoy small amounts at a time. That might be a really important step to take. and consider preparing them along with another gut-friendly option. So, for example, if you're making tofu, add it with some white rice because we know white rice is really easy for the gut to handle, or making some quinoa and having it with some cooked carrots, because again, another choice, or cooked asparagus. Really gut-friendly things that otherwise could help alongside these less gut-friendly things, like some of our plant proteins. They can be tolerated a little bit better. So a little bit more about gut-friendly ways to eat plant foods. So we can soak and rinse and cook them really well. And that goes especially for some of our whole grains or our intact grains. I know people that soak them overnight and then they'll cook them the next day. For our beans, we can do the same thing. Start with small portions and then gradually go from there. Pairing them with spices that are thought to be digestive friendly, like fennel or ginger, even cumin and turmeric. These help to kind of digest some of those plant proteins as well. I would recommend avoid stacking plant proteins in one meal. So, I talked about quinoa and, lentils or beans, but maybe just have the quinoa or maybe just have the beans as you're starting out and then just kind of build from there. Now, there's something called alpha galactosidase. It's a digestive enzyme that breaks down complex carbohydrates, specifically galacto-oligosaccharides, or GOS. And they're found in our beans and our vegetables and our whole grains. And so taking that helps us reduce our gas and our bloating when we're eating those things, very commonly known as BINO. So that's something to consider, especially if you're eating those foods and you're finding those foods you don't tolerate as well. What are some quick and easy recipes? I'm glad someone asked. So edamame and smashing the edamame with avocado and putting that on toast, super easy. That'll come together in 5 minutes. Or doing that with beans and peas with avocado, or mixing in some hummus. Boom. Like that's so quick and easy. Or taking some pre-baked tofu. It's already made. It's seasoned like the sriracha baked tofu, and it's not that spicy, I promise, and you just slice that, it's ready to be consumed. Or you can heat it up real quick, and wrap it in some whole wheat, or put it on top of like a whole wheat English muffin. Boom, you're good. Top it with some sprouts if you want. Like it's delicious. Lunch, smashing again, that idea of smashing chickpeas with tahini or avocado, chop in some celery and some lemon, squeeze some lemon, throw in some garlic. Boom, you've got lunch. It takes no time at all. Taking some leftover quinoa from the night before and throwing in some canned beans that you've rinsed, chopping up some veggies, making that red lentil curry that I love making. It's so quick and easy. Um, uh, Sauteing some tofu with some veggies, really easy peasy. There's no recipes here because I don't think it needs one. But if you need a recipe, go online and there's tons to explore. I make a sweet potato and black bean burger that comes together in a matter of minutes, like 20 minutes. It's so easy and yummy. Or cook up some bean pasta and then throw into that some more beans. It's really delicious with some tomatoes. And then snacking on some thawed out edamame, having some hummus, having some peanut butter. There's our plant proteins, really super simple. And the best part about that is that they're all really highly nutritious as well. Okay. Moving on, I promise we're almost there. Beans, you're going to get this slide again. You're getting these slides. So I'm not going to review this point by point, but beans and taking some dried beans and batch cooking them is one of the easiest way to transform that bag of beans into multiple meals for the week, right? So you just soak them, strain them. This is basic cooking instructions for beans. It could not be easier. I promise you, you won't turn back when you do it. They will store in the freezer for 3 months or in your fridge for up to 5 days. And if you take something like navy beans or cannellini beans, even chickpeas, you can repurpose them for so many different meals. So many, right? So for example, this is one. So for cannellini beans, you can make like a kale and white bean hash, a citrus and white bean salad, a white bean sausage, and maybe it's plant-based sausage or not sausage, and a kale pizza. The options are endless, right? So this website pulses.org has a list of different beans and even split peas where you can take a serving of those beans and turn them into different recipes. So it gives you really that versatility while maintaining flavor and nutrition. Okay, last couple questions, I promise. So quinoa versus amaranth. That was the question. So I guess we're comparing the two. Look on the slide. Do you know which one is which? Which one's quinoa? Which one's amaranth? I know my audience knows. So those tiny, teeny, tiny ones are amaranth, and then the those tiny, teeny, tiny ones are amaranth, and then the white ones next to it are quinoa. But it comes in different colors if you haven't noticed, quinoa. So both of them are one of the six pseudo grains. So it's not technically a grain, but a seed, which is pretty wild. Because of that, it has a pretty good protein profile, including the amino acids. So both of them contain all nine essential amino acids. Quinoa is high in potassium, something that Americans don't eat a lot of. Amaranth has this really interesting compound called lunicin. It's a peptide. It's believed to have anti-inflammatory and anti-cancer properties. Quinoa has 10% or more of copper, fiber, iron, thiamine, and peroxidine, all important. They sound like scary words, some of them, but they're all vitamins and minerals. Whereas amaranth has 10% or more of our fiber, our iron, our selenium, and our peroxidine. That's a B vitamin. Quinoa has 20% or more of our magnesium. Americans don't eat enough magnesium. Also manganese and folic acid. And then amaranth similarly has 20% or more of manganese and magnesium. So which one wins? I can't pick a winner. I think it's a win-win situation. So they're both great. And I would integrate both as much as you can for some variety in the diet. Okay, last question. So what about the portfolio diet and psyllium? So have you heard of the portfolio diet? I did a long time ago, and I think it's making a resurgence, and I'm going to tell you why. So plant proteins, this is what's emphasized in the portfolio diet. It's mostly plant proteins, nuts and seeds, 25 grams of soy food daily, and it's part of a diet low in cholesterol and saturated fat, and it's been shown to help lower the risk of heart disease. So plant sterols, that's what's in our soy foods or phytosterols. They exist naturally in soy foods, the highest, but also it's found in smaller amounts in nuts, peas, and canola oil. Plant sterols have a structure like cholesterol, so when we eat them, it limits the amount of cholesterol that our body can absorb. How cool is that? It like competes. And then viscous fiber is high in the portfolio diet, and it's a type of fiber that is a somewhat sticky quality. So think about okra or like oats, like a bowl of porridge, stick to your rib oats, barley, eggplant, apples, oranges, berries, persimmons, yum. They all are really high in viscous fiber and they're kind of sticky. And psyllium fiber is a type of viscous fiber as well. What those fibers do is they help to naturally lower the LDL cholesterol, the lousy cholesterol, because it's so sticky. So it sticks to the cholesterol. And then when we have a bowel movement, it takes it with it. Good stuff. So the portfolio diet may not be as popular as the Mediterranean or the DASH diet, but there's a lot of overlap between all of them. The idea behind the portfolio diet is to kind of combine as many of those foods together. So we kind of maximize reduction or effects when we do all of those things. It really does emphasize whole grains, fruits, veggies, plant protein, nuts, and plant oils. It's a little bit more plant forward than Mediterranean and DASH. So it's like a kind of the next level up. So very similar, and you may be familiar with Mediterranean DASH, but now I'm introducing you to portfolio. And if you're more inclined to go more vegan or plant-based, this might be for you. Now, there was a research study published like a year or two ago, and they followed for 30 years, they followed 210,000 people. And those people that had the higher scores closer to a portfolio diet compared to those who had the least had a 14% lower risk of heart disease. Really good stuff. Those who followed it more closely lowered their LDL, obviously, by 30%. And they also had lower levels of inflammation. In this study, they measured that through C-reactive protein. That's a blood test. It is another way to pursue plant-based eating that may introduce some nutritious foods to your table. So really great stuff. Okay. My favorite resources, if you're watching the big game and you're thinking about noshing on some things, you might like Forks Over Knives. They have some plant-based options for Super Bowl Sunday. Meatless Monday is one of my favorite campaigns. If you're looking for any information plus recipes plus how-tos, Meatless Monday is for you. And then the portfolio diet. There's a nice write-up of the article, and the research was done out of Harvard. So it might be worth a little extra read if you're curious. Our next Ask the Dietitian is in March, the first Friday in March. It's at the same time at 1 o'clock. And we're going to be talking about sugar substitutes. I cannot wait. I get asked about them a lot. So I hope to get, as usual, more great questions about that. I'm going to stop my share. And I thank you for watching and for staying on a little longer than usual.